Hey, this is Steve Olsher, and we've gone through the archives to find some of our favorite episodes from over the years of Reinvention Radio. We've been doing this a long time. As a matter of fact, we released our first episode of Reinvention Radio in 2009, and we've sat down with literally hundreds of people over the years, and we decided, you know what? Let's find some of our favorites, and we're going to re-release them as Reinvention Radio Classics. Hope you enjoy it.
Love podcasts? You'll love Podcast Magazine, taking readers into the lives of today's leading podcasters and beyond the microphone of the shows fans love. Each month, Podcast Magazine's dedicated writers share personal interviews, industry happenings, exclusive categorical charts, and independent ratings and reviews of under-the-radar shows. If you listen to podcasts, subscribe now at podcastmagazine.com and grab a free lifetime subscription while you can. That's podcastmagazine.com.
This is where normal comes to die. Mediocrity meets its final demise, and the status quo is unabashedly dismantled. Welcome to Reinvention Radio. Now, here's your host, Steve Olsher.
Alrighty, welcome. Mary Goulet, how are you, my friend?
Good.
Richie Ote, what's up, my brother?
Yeah, doing great.
Good. Super excited today because we are hanging out with the one and the only JLD himself, Johnny Lou Dumaris. What's up, Senor? How you doing, man? And actually, I can call you Senor now that you live in Puerto Rico, right?
Now that I live in Puerto Rico, I can say, living la vida loca. Life is good on the Isla de Encanta, Puerto Rico.
Yeah, man. You have always been a trendsetter, and clearly you are a trendsetter in terms of Puerto Rico, man. I cannot stop my friends from moving to Puerto Rico. So when are you going to move back to San Diego and start the trend back here?
Never. Because, Steve, I like to keep the money that I make. And that's why I moved to Puerto Rico in 2016. I stopped paying the ridiculous taxes that stupid state charges.
Yeah.
And I pay a flat 4% tax rate. Life is good.
Life is good. All right, so we'll keep the conversation casual here today, man. No, it's good. No, we want it. We definitely want it. I mean, that's what we want to do, man. Is just get beyond the microphone here and keep things real casual with you. So let me just start by saying, first of all, in a lot of your interviews, your story kind of starts with you're working in commercial real estate and driving from point A to point B, and then you're like, why isn't there a daily podcast that you enjoy listening to? So I actually want to start before that, if we can, man. Give us more of an understanding of what life was like for you as a kid, and more specifically, what do you remember learning from your parents?
Great stuff. So I grew up in a very small town in Maine. We're talking 2,000 people. My dad was the small town lawyer, kind of like the Atticus Finch type from To Kill a Mockingbird. And it was just me growing up in this area where I just would put my bike helmet on, bike a quarter mile down the street to the Alfred Park, which was the town park. And I just play basketball and baseball and hang out with my friends. And, went to an incredibly small elementary school with like 30 other kids in my grade, and then a pretty small high school, with just a couple hundred people in my class. And it was like a very, very small time environment. But the reality is that my dad did instill some pretty important things in me as like a businessman, as an entrepreneur. He was a lawyer who hung his own shingle. So he was essentially working for himself, by himself for about the past 35 years. And I just loved immediately seeing how I could be like, Dad, it's 3 p.m. I'm done with school. Can you come and hit ground balls to me? And he's like, all right, let me move a couple things around and I'll be right there. And he would do that 3, 4, 5 days a week. Like he never missed a game. He worked super hard, but on his own schedule. And I saw that, and I understood the value of what it meant to be an entrepreneur, a businessman or a businesswoman who was running their own schedules. And I loved that. And another thing that he really brought to me early on too, which I've since showed with our monthly income reports that we publish every single month, the details, all of our revenue and expenses and all that jazz, was he was always an open book when it came to money. Like I hear so many stories of parents just being so closed with finances, never talking about it, just being like really stressed out about money and all that stuff. It's not that like he wasn't like focused on it and there wasn't some worries there sometimes, but he was an open book. He's like, hey, look at this is our bank account. This is how much it costs to light the house. This is how much it costs to heat the house. This is how much it costs to. So I just got it growing up of like, you needed to make money because there was expenses. Whereas like 97%, and this is a made up percentage, but it's a ridiculous percentage of people graduate high school knowing trigonometry, but not knowing how to balance a checkbook. Like it's pathetic and it's disgusting, but it's true. But like I got those skills growing up in a very small town in Maine.
Did he draw the line though in terms of what the annual income was? Like a lot of parents might show you, hey, here's the light bill and here's, what the mortgage is or these sort of things if they have, those sort of bills. Did he actually show you in the same way that you share in such a transparent manner, what you guys are doing with Entrepreneur on Fire and all of the related entities to, that you got going on there? Did your dad actually show you what they were making on an annual or monthly basis?
Everything.
Too? Really?
He would show me, this is how much
accounts?
money we made, bank accounts.
Really?
This is our Fidelity investment account. This is how much money we lost today because the stock market went down. This is why I had to let one of our secretaries go because, the business had a slow year. We can't afford 2 secretaries anymore. So like he was just open across the board, making things happen. And it was just like super eye-opening to me.
Yeah. And so you were in the military and
officer for 8 years, sir.
Yeah, man. And
thank you for your service.
Right.
I appreciate that appreciation.
So why did you decide to enlist and what was the hardest part of that experience?
So talking to a civilian, I'll just kind of share really quickly that I didn't enlist. That's
Okay.
what you would do if you were going to enter directly out of high school as like a private, so to speak. You become an enlisted soldier. I decided that I wanted to go to college, but guess what? My dad wasn't going to pay for college at a private school because it was a waste of money. And when I could just go to the state school for $2,500 a year in Maine, which of course makes total sense because it was a great school. So if I wanted to go to my dream school, which was Providence College in Rhode Island, a private Catholic school that cost $50,000 a year, I was either going to have to go into massive debt or I was going to have to get a scholarship. So I went down the Army ROTC scholarship route, got accepted by the U.S. military. And so they paid for all of my tuition, all of my housing, all of my books. Plus, here's the beautiful thing, man. Picture this. I got paid $75 a week while I was a college student, which of course people would be like, $75 a week, like that's my morning breakfast. But you know what? That was all the money in the world to a college freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, man. So it was everything that I needed. I graduated with no college debt on the ROTC scholarship, and I spent the next 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Army, getting out as a captain back in 2010.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So, Mary, did you have a question as well? I don't want to. I could totally take JLD's entire time here, but I want to make sure I kick it over to you guys for sure.
No, it's not a question. Well, maybe it turns into one. So, with your father giving you that transparency around finances, and it's kind of the osmosis that drips in, and you form an awareness about it going into your adulthood, and then you go into the military with such discipline and structure. How have those two, or how much do those two elements made you successful with Entrepreneur on Fire and your business?
They both played a massive role. Like when you say the word discipline, it was something I did not have going into college. It was something I had to implement during college, not because of college per se, but because being a ROTC cadet, there's a lot of things you need to be doing that's military-like that started to instill a little bit of discipline into me. But then when I actually became an officer in the U.S. Army and then was sent to Iraq for 13 months to be a platoon leader in charge of 4 tanks and 16 men for 13 months in Iraq during a war, it was like, if you're not going to be disciplined and focused during that time frame, you're either going to die or you're going to be responsible for some other people potentially dying and losing their lives or getting severely injured. So that was when it was just like, okay, time to grow up at 23 years old. This is real deal Holyfield stuff. And I just became disciplined. And what did my captain, commanding officer at the time kind of break this down for me as? Well, disciplined is being a disciple to a plan of action. So create a plan of action and then be a disciple to execute that plan. And by the way, a good plan now is better than a great plan later. And that's really one thing that the Army taught me was, listen, you're not going to come up with this general patent, amazing plan right now. So just do the best you can do right now and then execute upon that. Because if you wait to come up with that perfect plan, the bullets are flying, the bombs are dropping, you might not live to execute that perfect plan. So make it happen. And I just always use that mentality in entrepreneurship. A lot of people are just like, I need to wait till my website's ready, my social media is ready, and all this stuff is like perfect. And then guess what? They wait, and it's never perfect. And then they launch, but then they wasted all this time because guess what? When you launch your podcast, when you launch your social media channel, when you launch your YouTube, nobody listens, nobody cares because they don't know about you yet. It takes time to build all these things. So I was just let's just jump and then let, the parachute open as I come down and figure things out. And that was directly a result of my time in the military.
Perfect lead into the question I was going to ask you of when you then were getting out, and I know there was a little bit of a transition, but when you were getting into podcasting itself, were you a fan of podcasts and you had like, this is going on and I like what these people are doing, but I'm going to make this minimum viable plan and do this? Or did you just jump in and take it on as it came?
I was a massive fan of podcasting, and I think that's one of the big reasons for my success because I loved the medium. I understood the medium. I could honestly see that the medium was going to explode because I was thinking, how can't it? I mean, this is free, on-demand, targeted content. Like I was a real estate agent at the time in San Diego, and I'm driving down the road, being forced to listen to local radio. And I don't care about the San Diego Chargers. Like, I don't care about, a lot that was going on in the political world. I didn't want to hear Miley Cyrus 15 times in an hour. Like, those things didn't interest me. But then I found podcasts and I was like, oh my God, like I can literally choose to listen to what I want, when I want. And then when I get home, I can press pause and pick it up the next morning and it's all free. Like, how is this even possible? Then I was like, holy crap, like I need to be involved in this. It's like, you hear some of those older movies where people are like, plastics, it's the future. And you're like, well, it's obviously you can see now, like in hindsight, the plastics were going to be the future. Not that they're great for the environment, they're terrible, but it's obvious that they were going to be amazing, for all the things that they do in today's world back then. But like so many people couldn't see that coming. I could just like see that podcasting was going to be taking hold for all those reasons I just shared. Its storytelling ability, its ability to capture subscribers, and to capture just like the attention of people in a very focused way. Like when people are working out, when they're running, when they're in the car driving, when they're folding laundry, when they're walking their dog, like these are very captive moments where people are doing other things, but they're not really, they're multitasking, but like they can really be giving a ton of bandwidth to that spoken word. And I just got it and I loved it. So for 2 years, I just consumed podcasts every single day. I would always have them going on in the background as I was doing X, Y, or Z. And then at one point, the light bulb just went on and I said, A, I can do this. And B, there's a huge void that's not being that's not being met right now in the podcasting space. And that's the daily podcast of successfully interviewing successful entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And that's where the idea came.
Yeah. And I don't want to gloss over this, and I like when we move forward with the interviews, but I want to make sure that people understand the extent of actually what happened for you in Iraq before we move forward. I just want to close the loop on that because I think it's important for people to know that you lost some men there, no?
Yeah, so I was a platoon leader of 16 men in 4 tanks. So 23-year-old second lieutenants, officer in the U.S. Army. And we deploy, again, with 16 men, 4 men per tank, 4 tanks. And I'm the tank commander. So I'm on one of the tanks and I'm in charge of all 4 of them. And I remember so clearly when we were at Fort Riley, Kansas, about to deploy, we have like our deployment ceremony. And I'm literally like hugging and shaking the hands of husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, kids, and looking them in the eye and being like, I'm bringing your loved one home. Like that was my job as the officer, as the platoon leader of that platoon. And of course I meant it. And of course I was naive about a lot of things, never having been in war before. But over the course of that 13 months, we lost 4 of the 16 soldiers. They gave that ultimate sacrifice. And, I had to write those letters. Like I had to be the person informing them that their loved ones would never return. And, one of the most heartbreaking ones that, obviously I think about on a daily basis is, my platoon sergeant had a daughter while he was deployed, and he had a picture of her, but he never got to hold her. He never got to see her. And to me, it was so tragic and it was so sad and it was just so overwhelming at the time. You just have to kind of push through. But kind of a point I'll make from that is, for me now, it's just so simple to get in perspective in life. When like a recording gets, warped, or a sponsor drops off, or this happens that's crappy, or power goes out, while I'm interviewing Tony Robbins, or whatever might happen. Like, I can put things in perspective and be like, you're not getting shot at, like you're not in danger, like you're not, like literally in war right now. Like, things could be so much worse. So although this isn't ideal, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm happy about it, I'm at least going to put things in perspective, so it's not going to ruin my overall perspective of this event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing the rest of that, man. How do you define success? There's lots of different definitions out there. One of my favorites is success means having the courage, the determination, the will to become the person you were meant to be. You've had a lot of success, and maybe how you defined it 5-10 years ago is very different from how you would define it now. How would you define success when you first started down this entrepreneurial path versus how you define it now?
I mean, if I'm going back to think about how I would define success like 7 years ago when I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire, it probably would have been that I could pay my bills doing something I enjoyed doing, which was Entrepreneurs on Fire, which was interviewing people and growing a brand in the business and a podcast, not really knowing what my path to paying those bills was going to look like, because I was still about a year out from generating any revenue with the podcast and with the overall business. But that would have been what I would have probably defined success as. But, looking back now, having, generated over $16 million in the past 7 years, and having Entrepreneurs on Fire netting over $1 million a year in revenue, getting to keep almost all of that, living in Puerto Rico, paying a flat 4% tax rate, yada, yada, yada. Like, I now define success is really one word, which is freedom. Because now my success has really given me freedom. And the freedom that it's given me is location freedom. I chose to live in Puerto Rico, and I want to live here, and I am able to live here. It gives me lifestyle freedom. I work really, really hard some days, and I work almost not at all other days. Like, I'm able to really structure my schedule and create my boundaries that I want to create. Kate and I went on a 90-day world trek back from August till November, where we went to Fiji, where I spent 4 days with Tony Robbins at his resort in Namale with just 9 other people. Then we did the other, basically 85 days in Europe, just spending a week in the Airbnb in all these different countries and cities. And it was unbelievable and gorgeous. And, we didn't not work during that time. We were putting in about an hour to an hour and a half a day, doing emails and social media and all of these things. But it's around a business that we built and a business that we enjoyed. So it's still our choice to continue to want to do that. Mm-hmm. And that really is what I would kind of define success at this point is the freedom to do all of those things: the location freedom, the lifestyle freedom, the financial freedom.
Yeah, man. So let's talk for a second about want versus need. And it really does seem like, you have everything that you want, and you probably have everything that you need. First of all, do you have everything that you want and everything that you need? And if so, how do you stay fired up when you don't want more and you don't need more?
Well, I think if you were to be technical on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I probably have all that I need. We have our dream home down here in Puerto Rico. We're able to do what we want to do, and like all those different things. We have shelter, we have food, we have comfort, we have all that. But as far as like what I want, like I still have this desire to have a big impact in this world. And I really would love to be able to, see that there's earthquakes, happening here in Puerto Rico, which there are, and just be able to go and swoop in and like write a $10 million check and just say, let's just take care of the situation now. Or like identify another issue in Africa or in, Thailand or in the United States, and like go and like just completely make a huge impact there. And like, am I there financially now? Like, no. And like, will I ever be there? Maybe not. But, that's something that I would love to achieve and to attain at some point is just to be able to have that kind of financial influence where I really could make a massive impact to a cause that I really believe in and would want to make a difference in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Richie, did you have anything? Again, I don't want to hog the mic here.
No, I was just going to kind of go back to the initial start with podcasting, and you were a fan. It was obvious that you didn't really want to model after what someone else was doing. I noticed by the way you structured your questions that unlike some people, your answers or the answers that came back to you would always be different, right? Where some people could always have universal answers like, yes, I believe in working out every day. So what do you think for people who want a podcast now? Do you think that there's a format that people should be following, or do you think it's still wide open as far as you could just create any new type of a format?
So going back to the first part of what you were sharing is I really believe that Entrepreneurs on Fire was successful because I focus on the story. And, a lot of people would say, well, doesn't your podcast get boring because you just ask the same 6 questions every time? But I'm like, you're completely missing everything, which is the question is, tell me your biggest entrepreneurial failure. And how are you ever going to get the same answer to that from anybody? I mean, everybody has an unbelievable story of their failure that's 100% unique to that individual. And so that's where story really comes in. I'm a big believer in story. Like there's a reason why history is his story. Like it's all about the stories that we, just grew up. That's how we used to pass along history as, before you could write things down and before you could store things on a computer. It was by the spoken word. And that's why, when you hear the phrase like once upon a time, like you kind of lean in because you want to hear that history, like what happened back then. Like people really resonate with that. And so kind of moving forward into the second part of your question is, I think it still is wide open, but you've got to do it in a way that is really creating massive solutions to real people's problems. So if you're going to launch a podcast in 2020, it's an amazing time for it. There's more listeners now for podcasts than there ever has been. Like people are like, John, it was like so easy for you back in 2012. But I'm like, but nobody listened to podcasts back in 2012. Like I was a weirdo for listening to podcasts. It was hard. It was like techie. Like you couldn't be like, Alexa, play podcasts. Like, and it wasn't in the car dashboard. It wasn't in this. It wasn't in that. Like you literally had to kind of be a little bit of a techie person to figure out how to make it happen. And there wasn't that many listeners. And now the listenership has exploded and it's everywhere. And companies like Pandora and Spotify and iHeartRadio and these other companies have all like gone all in on this medium and are doing amazing things to kind of spread the word. So now you have this much bigger potential audience. But with that, I think you've got to be very specific and very structured of, hey, I am going to solve one person's problem at a very high level. So what was the problem that I saw back in 2012 that was pretty broad, but by the way, that was back in 2012. So you could be a little more broad back then and still win because the competition was so much lower and so much less saturated. But I was solving the problem of that person like myself that was driving to work every day, that was working out multiple days per week, that loved the podcast, but wasn't getting enough, didn't want to wait a whole week for the next episode to come out when they just listened to a 25-minute episode, so that every single day was right there for people. It was the right solution to a real problem. So what is your podcast going to provide as a real solution to a real problem? And just interviewing successful entrepreneurs, you're not solving a problem that's not being solved by hundreds, if not thousands of other people. So you may have some level of success, but they could just go to any others and what's keeping them listening to yours and all these different things. So that's where the focus has to be in 2020 and beyond when it comes to podcasting is, are you going to be able to be best in show? And for me, it's like, I want to solve a real problem for real listeners. And if I can't be the best at this level, then I've got to go one niche down. And if I can be the best at this level, then I'm going to stay here until I've got momentum to then potentially move back up to that next level. And for some people, it might be going 3 levels down. And that's fine, because you sometimes do have to niche till it hurts, but you've got to find that place where you're solving a real problem at the best level of your competitors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And it plays a little bit into the question around discoverability as well. And I mean, reality is, because you've been at this now for some time, you well, smartly so, you received the benefits of getting into podcasting early, and really have been able to benefit from what I would call the ascending spiral, which is, as new listeners come into the podcast mix, they see the shows that are in the rankings, see the shows that are on the charts. They say, that's an interesting show. Let me check that out. So they start listening, they start subscribing, they start downloading, they start rating, they start reviewing. And then, of course, that helps those shows that are already popular stay popular and ascend in that spiral, which makes it really, really hard for most mere mortals starting a show to break into that, unless you're really driving listeners from other existing platforms. So to that end, how do you think new shows get discovered? And we know 300,000 shows were launched just in 2019. Those numbers continue to grow. How do those shows get discovered and ultimately survive?
Well, you do what I just shared, which I won't go into super detail again, but you do really be focused on not just being this broad, vague show, but really being a niched, specific show that you're willing to serve a really diverse audience. And I kind of like the idea too of like combining two niches. Like, say like you just became a vegan and you're like, well, what is like something that vegans really struggle with? Well, what's the right, ways to exercise now that you're not having any kind of meat in your life? Well, what if like yoga was a great way to exercise if you're a vegan? Well, what if you create now a podcast combining the two niches of the vegan yogi? Like now everybody who's a vegan or everybody likes yoga, and like, there's like this crossover here. So now you can be like this solution to two niches, serious problems, which is, I love yoga, but I'm a vegan, or I love vegan, what I do for exercise, and you're able to solve that problem at a very compact level.
So just reading between the lines, is that because of search? Are you saying if people are going and then they're searching for, like almost like SEO is for websites, right? I mean, they're going and they're throwing these search terms into the box. Is that how new podcasters potentially should be thinking about it, and even how new listeners are trying to find shows?
Yeah, keyword searching is really big for the reasons of actually searching for podcasts and then finding the shows that you want, and actually having a show title that is promising the solution to the problem that people have, which is why they're looking for that content, is going to get you to press play a lot more than just having like the John Lee Dumas show. Like, okay, what is a John Lee Dumas show? Well, I don't know. Like, people get the Tim Ferriss show because they've been obsessed with Tim Ferriss for now 11 years, ever since he launched, the 4-hour work week. Like, that's why that show worked. But like launching the John Lee Dumas show in 2012 wouldn't have worked. But launching Entrepreneurs on Fire, promising daily interviews with successful entrepreneurs that are on fire, that worked because that's what people were looking for. They were looking for other entrepreneurs, their stories, their interviews. And that's why shows that have very clear solutions to people's problems in the title, in the name, get discoverability. Also, just like when you're scanning, you mentioned, like people go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and they're looking in the top rankings, and a show title will catch their eye. And if that show title promises the solution they're looking for, they're much more likely going to go in. Now, I will give an additional practical piece of advice on top of all of this. Is so many people say, John, I've launched my show, I've launched my podcast. How do I grow my listenership? And I look at them and I say, well, how many times have you been a guest on other relevant category specific podcasts over the past 3 months? And they'll be like, well, I don't have time. Like, I've been on like 1 or 2, but I mean, like, I'm focusing so much on my own show. And it's like, listen, podcast listeners listen to podcasts, and the average podcast listener listens to 7 podcasts. So you need to spend your time,
and that's per week, 7 per week.
And that's per week. So you need to spend your time going to a place like Apple Podcasts. Let's say you have a fitness podcast. Go to Apple Podcasts, click on the health category, look at the top 200 podcasts that are there, and then you need to be contacting the hosts of those shows with a very specific call to action that's saying something along the lines of, hey, Sean, I see you have a great podcast called The Model Health Show. The last 10 episodes, you rocked it. They were about X, Y, and Z. I have a fitness podcast. I specialize in this topic that you haven't covered in a while. I would love to come on your show and share this specific topic that you haven't covered in a long time with your audience. Here's a proposed title. Here's a couple of proposed bullet points. I'd love to be on your show. And oh, by the way, Sean, I'm a podcast host as well. So number one, it might make sense for you to come on my show to share your genius with my audience. And oh, number two, I'm a podcast host. So I understand the importance of that when my show goes live on your podcast, I'm going to promote the crap out of it to my entire audience because I want as many people to listen to it as possible. Like you make 50 of those pitches, that will be the best pitches any of those hosts have ever received. And you're going to be able to now line up a guest spot on all of these podcasts that have listeners, a built-in audience that already have a podcast app, that already listen to podcasts. It's already part of their life. You're converting the converted already, which is amazing. And then your call to action at the end of that show is, by the way, I hope you keep listening to the Model Health Show because Sean's awesome. I want to become one of your 7 though. So if you want to check out the Healthy Health Fit show that I just launched, this is where you should check it out. I have some great podcast episodes there. Come listen. And now you're there delivering value, having the spotlight on you for the episode and being able to give a call to action for people to listen to your show.
Yeah. Great idea.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that it's really cool how it seems like podcasters and YouTubers understand, maybe it's because more podcasters than YouTubers, but they understand trying to teach people about this new medium that was new. And so for lack of a better word, it's kind of incestuous. They understand the collaboration. They really want to help each other out. Unlike some industries where it's like, I'm not going to go on that other one. They're going to steal my market or steal my market share. It seems like podcasters really enjoy and are very supportive of other podcasters.
Yeah, I call it commingling your audiences. And I think that's the way to look at it is like, listen, like there are going to be people that are going to listen to an average of 7 podcasts every single week. So, let's just be one of those 7. Like, let's help each other out. We have similar audiences. Let's make sure your audience knows about me, my audience knows about you. And let's commingle these audiences and all ships will rise in that high tide.
At some point here, though, do you think podcasting peaks? Do we, won't too many of us have shows and honestly, not everyone should have a podcast. Yeah.
All of that is true. I mean, all good things come to an end. I'm a huge believer in the phrase, this too shall pass. Like when things are going great, you got to look in the mirror and say, this too shall pass. When things are going horrible, look in the mirror and see the exact same thing because it's true. Like podcasting is obviously going to, at some point, become out of vogue, just like everything ever, period, end of story. When? I don't know. Like,
don't you think it's just going to transition into the next thing that we didn't see before podcasting came about?
Yes.
Maybe, with technology and innovation and everything that's going on, I think you can parlay your audience into that new thing.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah, like a lot of people have successfully, like with Snapchat, they were like on Snapchat for a couple of years and then Instagram stories came out and kind of copied everything Snapchat was doing. A lot of people were just having more success on Instagram stories. So they're just like, hey, if you're watching me on Snapchat, like this is my last snap, like get over and follow me on Instagram because that's where I'm putting all my time, energy, and effort into. And the meaningful audience followed them. And, those that didn't, they weren't worth anything anyways.
How much of some of these other projects you've done, like your journal and doing the affiliate marketing and sponsorships, how much of that was just you thinking this is where you should go meets percentage of listening to your audience and what they were asking for?
None of it was me thinking this is where I should go. Like the biggest mistake people make is they're like, John, you come up with all of these multi-million-dollar ideas because I have all these multi-million-dollar products and services. I didn't come up with any of them. I always ask my audience these 4 questions. First off, where'd you hear about me? Because I want to know all the time where people heard about me, where they listened to me. I'm hoping some people, when I'm asking them in the next month, will be like, I heard about you on Reinvention Radio, like blah, blah, blah. Like, this is why I'm doing these things and having fun and hanging out with Steve, who I've been friends with for years and years. In fact, I have a really old school story. I could tell a little bit about that if we have time.
Sure.
But, that's just the example of like, I always want to know where people are hearing about me and my podcast so I can amplify those areas. Number two, I ask them, what do you like most about my show? So I can really implement those things to a next level. And what do you like least about my show? And when one person says one thing, I ignore it. But if I hear 10 people say the same thing, maybe I take a little stock in that and change some things up. And number four, what is your biggest struggle and obstacle right now? And they share it. And by them sharing those obstacles and struggles, they're giving me the ideas that I've turned into multi-million-dollar ideas, like Podcaster's Paradise, the Freedom Journal, the Mastery Journal, the Podcast Journal, the 100-Day Goal Journal, like books that I've written, courses that I've created, communities that I've made, like all these things has all come from me creating a solution to the problem that my actual listeners are telling me they currently have.
Yeah. Wade, I think you've been jumping out of your chair back there. What's up?
Well, I just wanted to build on that, but a quick flashback. You're talking about the old days. Back in 2006, 2007, we're doing eBay radio, and people are downloading that on their 56K modem and burning it to a CD so they could play that in their car as they're driving to work. So, talk about...
Thanks for sharing the story.
Yeah, the ways people do that. But the follow-up question is, if fundamentally what we're doing is building relationships with communities, that I believe is a new business model, how are you using additional social media platforms to build your community and support the podcast?
So that's a great question. And one really tactical answer I'll give here is right now there are Facebook groups on everything. Galore, and they're free and they're public and they're thriving and people are in there engaging every single day. So what I tell people is a great strategy is find one or two Facebook groups, or if you're more corporate, maybe a LinkedIn group will be more for you. And you find a couple of these groups that are free and that are thriving, that are chock full of your perfect listener. So like a real random example would be like, if you're a realtor in Southern California, find a couple thriving, public, free Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups that are talking about real estate in Southern California. Like, get real specific there. And believe me, there's plenty of them. And there's things like this there's groups like this for everything. Just use the Facebook search bar and you'll find them. Join those groups and then do this. This is where you win at a high level. You spend 30 days doing nothing but this. 5 minutes a day for those 30 days. You log into that group, set a timer for 5 minutes because you got to value your own time. And you do these 4 things. You ask a question in the group. You answer somebody else's question in the group. You give one piece of advice and you give one piece of guidance. And that's it. You give one piece of support and you give one piece of guidance. So just like supporting somebody for like, congratulations on the house you just bought, or a piece of guidance on, make sure you get your homeowner's insurance, whatever that might be. So like you're doing that for 5 minutes every day in those 2 or 3 groups. So at most, if you're in 3 groups, that's 15 minutes total. So now you're in these 3 groups, 15 minutes a day for, 30 straight days. So you're spending 15 minutes in the morning as part of your morning routine, asking those 4 questions. You're asking a question, answering a question, giving one piece of support, one piece of guidance. By the end of those 30 days, you will have created yourself as the most supportive, as the most active, and as the most valuable member of that group, period, end of story. And so then on day 31, when Sam asks a question about, hey, I'm actually, curious about, mortgage trends in 2020, what that looks like, you can be like, Sam, I actually just launched a podcast on that. It's episode 12. Here's the link. Go check it out. And now not just Sam, but everybody in that group who's been seeing you be so supportive and engaged and friendly for 30 days now is going to be like, I trust this person. I didn't know they had a podcast, but now that I know, that's super cool. I'm going to go check it out. If you go in and do that day one, which is what, by the way, everybody does, 99.9% of people, they go in day one and just say, oh, by the way, my podcast is live. Check it out. And just like delete, block, you're out of here. We don't care. We don't like you. We don't know you. We don't trust you. If you do it my way, you've built up all of that. You've earned the right to just mention your show in a relevant situation 31 plus days afterwards. And then you can really be growing an audience in a very powerful way.
Yeah, that's super smart. Share the story, man. I'd love to hear this. I mean, I know we've known each other for a long time, but now you got me curious. What's the story?
It's a cool story.
What is
so I was trying back in 2012 to wrap my head around how am I going to monetize? Like, who knew back then how to monetize a podcast? Like everybody was just like, oh, you just like podcasts is like part of what you do. And maybe you coach somebody that listens to your podcast. But there was nobody really just directly doing a podcast as their sole thing, and trying to make money just from that thing. Like they were doing other things like books and courses and whatever. It was all good, but I was trying to be really inventive. So I had my virtual assistant, this is back in 2012, go to like Amazon's, not just new release, but like about to be released books. So books that hadn't come out yet. And I had my assistant go through and message all of the authors in the business section who were about to have books released and say, hey, listen, my boss, John Lee Dumas, has a podcast called Entrepreneurs on Fire. His audience is about, is full of entrepreneurs, small business owners. And you're having a book that's coming out in a little bit about business, about whatever it might be. If you would want to sponsor an episode of Entrepreneurs on Fire, it's going to be like $300. And I'll give you like a 1 minute right at the beginning of my show pitch for my listeners to go buy your book.
Yeah.
And I got some really funny responses, man. Like I remember I got this one response. Can't remember the name of the book, Steve. Maybe you'll remember, but it was from the guy that wrote the book, like, What Color is Your Parachute, I think. And this guy took he wrote like 2,000 word response to me. I'll never forget reading it about why he was so awesome and why he would never, ever need any help with his books and how many books he sold and all this stuff. And I was just reading it being like, this guy's awesome. He's obviously very awesome. But then I get like a message from you and you're like, yeah, let's do it. And so like you PayPal me $300.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, Kate, somebody just paid me money to sponsor my podcast. Like, woo,
so cool.
Like Chris Brogan did it too, like, which is another funny story. And so I had I definitely had a success rate on it. And I promoted your book. Next episode, I promoted Chris's book. And then like I was actually asked to give a keynote talk that January. So January of 2013, just like 3 months after I launched the podcast at New Media Expo in Las Vegas, which you were also at. And I remember seeing you in the hallway and being like, hey, you want duck in during my talk because I specifically give you a shout out about how I've monetized my podcast so far. And like, that was back in 2012, 2013. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. So I officially have the title, or at least share the title as one of the first sponsors anyway, to put some money in your pocket there with the podcast. So that's
totally
awesome. Yeah. That's
big time.
cool. So I'm always going to be on John's
You
good
can
side
do
here.
that
So
for me.
I know. Just start a podcast. How about that?
I have one.
So actually, it's a good segue, man. So into revenue, what is 2020 projected revenue, and generally speaking, how will that break down for you in terms of where that revenue comes from?
Yeah, projected revenue is about $2.7 million gross, and we run about between a 70 and 80% profit margin on that, which is outstanding.
Absolutely.
It's through the roof. I mean, and that includes everything. We're talking down to the penny. And that's one thing in our monthly income reports. We always show that percentage as well. Like we had 1 month, like 4 months ago, we were at 91%, which we've never done since. But like we're typically between like 72 to 85% any month on keeping that percentage of the money that we actually make after expenses, et cetera.
Not to get too much in the weeds, but I'm curious, what would be your expenses if you're primarily an online business?
You got 4 employees, right?
Got employees.
Okay.
We've got so much software services. I mean, Zoom, you got to pay monthly for Zoom. I mean, we're paying, Facebook ads. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that comes in, that comes out to like $30,000, $40,000 a month. I mean, those are our expenses every single month, but we're making 160, 180, 300, on every single month. Like, in fact, one of my prouder things is since October of 2013, we haven't had a month under $100,000.
Wow.
We haven't had a month over 600. So we haven't had this like 7-figure month or anything, but we've been real consistent at like $200,000. We've had a few breakout months of like 400,000 and 500,000, but for the most part, we're kind of in that like 150 to 250 range. It's kind of been our sweet spot. And I personally made the decision for multiple reasons I won't get into now, but that like, I'm not trying to build EO Fire into an 8-figure a year business. Like I know what it would take to get there. I'm not saying I could take us there, but I know what it would take to try to get there. And I don't want that business now. That could change in the future, but I don't want that now. Like, I love the lifestyle business we've created. I love the size of our team. I love my lifestyle freedom, my location freedom. And
so the revenue breakdown to get to the 2.5, I assume a good chunk of that, and obviously with the margins, well, if you got affiliate type of revenue coming in, where you say, hey, go sign up here, and then you get a cut off of that, you've got zero expenses, tied to that. So in the let's just
not always, because especially in these big affiliate promotions like we're about to do with Tony Robbins, we're probably going to spend 6 figures in advertising for that affiliate promotion.
And, okay, so then to that end, generally speaking, in the 2.5, what do you anticipate the breakdown to be?
So I see the breakdown is probably going to be about like 40% all things sponsorship. Like, for instance, to be a guest on Entrepreneurs on Fire, it's a $3,500 appearance fee. Like, every guest on Entrepreneurs on Fire is paying an appearance fee to be on the show. So that's one thing.
100% of the guests now pay. You don't just bring people on anymore just because you want them on 100%, or is that still a percentage?
I'd say 85% would be the accurate percent. Like, we had Tony Robbins on because we're promoting his course. Sure. And have him pay, but he's an exception, not the rule. Wow. So across the board, 85-ish% is paying that $3,500 per month appearance fee. We have 2 sponsors on every show. Our average sponsor is paying $2,850 per episode. And
Damn
we have
it!
2
Really?
episode.
I should have there was such an arbitrage play there.
You could have locked me down.
Oh my God.
For like 10 years. It's amazing.
What was I thinking? I'll buy the next 10 years worth of ads at $300 a spot. Oh my God, I missed such an opportunity. Jesus. All right. So
you could be selling that stuff on the market.
Right.
So sponsorship's big. Affiliate revenue is another huge part of our pie. I'd say that's about 25 to 30% any given month. Podcasters Paradise is like another 20 to 25%. That's our premium podcasting course where we teach people how to create, grow, and monetize their own podcast. And then the journals would make up the biggest, the next biggest piece, which would probably be about 10%, where we sell the Freedom, the Mastery, the podcast journal.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, man, look, again, congrats on everything that you've been able to create. And again, congrats on having the freedom to be able to live where you want, do what you want, and so on. And even the freedom to be able to say, I don't want an 8-figure business, to just keep things where we are, to keep things turning and so on.
That might change someday.
Today that might change. No, wait, we got some time here. So let's just kind of humanize you a little bit here then as well. What still keeps you up at night? What scares you nowadays?
I mean, scare is a pretty big word. And like I said, I'm probably going back to my perspective from my military days. Like, not a lot scares me. I might have to kind of pull a page out of Gary Vaynerchuk's book, which is, the health and wellness of those that I love. Like, that scares me because that can change on a moment's notice. And that is something that, would really throw a massive wrench in my life for sure. But besides that, there's really just not that much that scares me. I mean, I feel like I've really set my business up, is to be fairly recession proof. Of course, it'll take a big hit, but as far as like the nest egg I've been able to build up as a result of moving down to Puerto Rico and being smart with my money. So a recession doesn't scare me. But like the health and wellness of the family would be the big thing.
And a lot of people have really great things to say about you, and like anyone who achieves a certain level of success, others, not quite as nice of things to say about you. What in what way do you think you're really the most misunderstood?
It's an interesting question. I would say that maybe that's kind of my excited enthusiasm is kind of, just like this facade for like nothing underneath. Whereas I really do feel like I've been able to build like a really solid marketing mind and business over the past 7 years. And, I think a lot of people kind of probably assumed that it was a little more of a flash in the pan. It was going to happen with the business in the first few years. Like, I can remember people being like, it's like, make sure you're saving your money because, you're making a couple $100,000 a month now. It's not going to last. And I didn't disagree with them. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely saving my money. Who knows? But, I've been able to kind of keep it going for these 7 years, and for, who knows how many more months or years I'll be able to keep this up. And, my hope is for a lot. And, I will kind of address what you said about, like some of the quote unquote haters that are out there, and just in life in general, is I really do look at all those individuals that, for myself and for anybody else who's attained a certain level of success, is just the fact that hurt people hurt people. Like, I really do believe that. And so I'm not just saying this, but like, I really just do feel empathy for individuals who lash out at others, who have achieved a certain level of success, because they're hurting. And I get it, because I've been jealous and frustrated and, hurt before, in my 20s and 30s, and things have happened, of course. So I get it. And so I just have empathy for that now. And I know, what I'm doing and who I'm serving, and that's where I keep my focus.
Yeah. And I will throw a thank you your way from the standpoint of, you were one of the first to embrace what we're doing with Podcast Magazine.
Yeah, I loved it.
And I know you said there might be some peaks here and things might be. I happen to think we're very much in the embryonic stages of the medium. That's certainly why we're investing in creating this magazine, this publication for the fans that covers podcasts and podcast culture, and really goes beyond the microphone in terms of the lives of the podcasters and stories that fans love. What was your, I know you said you love it, but what do you, in your heart, believe is appealing, or why did you say yes to supporting what we're doing with Podcast Magazine? What do you like about it?
Well, I love the medium. I've always loved the podcast medium from the moment my neighbor in San Diego came and heard me complaining about, listening to sports talk radio and how I hate the San Diego Padres anyways. And, just like listening to that and her being like, why don't you just listen to podcasts? And me being like, what's a podcast? And she's like, click, 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 click. I'm like, what? She's like, she opened up a whole new world for me. And like, I've loved the medium since then. Every time I hear the word podcast, like I kind of perk up a little bit, and I'm always curious and interested. And the fact that, it's just continuing to grow and evolve. And, I think that what you're doing is like another example of that. So like what I can do to support that, I'm really excited to do and happy to do. And, of course, in addition to that, just the fact that, you were willing to kind of support a podcaster way back early in his journey, as I told that story back in 2012. I love the fact that I can, in some way support what you're doing now in the podcasting sphere for that as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. And lastly, since you are so entrenched in the space, what are 3 podcasts that you listen to that hopefully not the usual suspects, but if they're usual
These
suspects,
are not the usual suspects.
What are they?
So the Newsworthy, I listen to it every single day.
Eric and Mandy.
Eric and Mandy's amazing.
Yep.
It's fast, fair, fun, on the go. I obviously listen to it every single day. It's like 6 to 8 minutes of like everything that's happening in the world that's, is worth knowing about in 6 to 8 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I listen to this podcast called Snacks Daily, which is kind of like the financial version of the Newsworthy. It's like 10 minutes long, and it just has 3 of the biggest financial kind of happenings that are going, covered, like WeWork failed IPO, like some. I find that all interesting.
Yeah.
And then I'll say the other one would be Business Wars. I love that podcast. It's by Wondery, and it's about Nike versus Adidas, Nintendo versus Sony, Ford versus Chevrolet. They tell the whole history behind that those companies, and they're just they're taking podcasting to the next level.
Yeah, those are great. We'll definitely look those up, man. And we'll let you jump here. Just again, really appreciate your time and your support. And we're gonna get you on one of these covers, man. We got Dave Ramsey and Katie Couric and Adam Carolla and all these. I mean, we got just folks are lining up to say yes here, man. So we'll definitely make sure that yours happens soon. And again, really appreciate the support, and you're taking so much time to hang out with us here today.
Can't wait, brother. It's going to be great. Great talking to all 3 of you. Have a wonderful day.
You too, my friend. All righty.
Awesome.
That is it. We did it.
Yay.
Yeah, I mean, he really is an OG, just an OG of podcasting, and so young, but it's interesting. Yeah, I actually remember that now that he mentions it. I remember very specifically my being at the same event that he was at, and him saying, "Come in the room. I'm going to be talking about, one of the ways that he's monetizing." And there you go. I mean, it kind of begs the question of like, can you plant seeds today that'll bear fruit years from now? And you just don't know how.
What was your ad for? Do you remember?
I believe it was for Internet Profits. It was for the book Internet Profits, and I was just trying to get some eyeballs and eardrums on that. And there was a section in Internet Profits on podcasting. Actually, I talked about Jason Van Orden in that particular section. And so that was one of my first ways of becoming familiar with podcasting was what Jason Van Orden was doing. And anyway, so that was that. Very cool. All right. Well, there we go. Awesome to hang with Johnny Lee Dumas. And we will talk to you guys really, really soon. Take care, everybody.
You just got dismantled. Thanks for listening to Reinvention Radio. For more information about the show and your host, Steve Olsher, visit reinventionradio.com.
Love podcasts? You'll love Podcast Magazine, taking readers into the lives of today's leading podcasters and beyond the microphone of the shows fans love. Each month, Podcast Magazine's dedicated writers share personal interviews, industry happenings, exclusive categorical charts, and independent ratings and reviews of under-the-radar shows. If you listen to podcasts, subscribe now at